And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Sipshan people. Founded in 2010, it was known as the Bipolar Disorder Society of British Columbia. In 2016, it was renamed the Stigma-Free Society. On today's Open Connection, we continue the conversation on mental health with Maggie.
The beginning of grade 9 is when everything really started to change for me. So the year started off really well. It was really good at first. I had my friends that I had been friends with for a long time, and it was exciting. It was exciting to start in a new school, and the school had a really good dance program and choir, and I was very excited and hopeful. But then there were certain things that started to happen. My grandparents, they started struggling with some really serious health issues, and it had a really big impact on me. I started to become really sad and really grumpy and irritable. Something was kind of triggered in me, and I wasn't myself. Everything was dark around me, and people around me started to notice that. I had been self-harming, and I remember this day when I had my best friend, and I was talking to her about kind of how I was feeling, like I wasn't feeling like myself, and she noticed like I had some scars. In her eyes, it wasn't support or concern, it was judgment, it was stigma. And then all of a sudden I just felt ashamed, like it just washed over me. And then I kept thinking like, okay, what is going on with me? There must be something wrong. So when I started acting differently like this, my friends, they didn't know how to support me. And then I remember one day, I have a very clear memory of this. They sat me down in the hallway, and they just said straight up, I don't think we should be friends anymore. And it still makes me emotional to this day. It's like, whoa, it's 10 years later, but it was like my first heartbreak, because I was really, really close with them. And I thought, and then all of a sudden I was like alone. I had been this super social person with all these people around me, but I was just completely alone, because it wasn't only them. It was as soon as they left, and I guess they probably told people about how I was acting differently, all my acquaintances, the friends through the friends, they also just disappeared. So I was in a new school and I was alone, and I just remember being really, really devastated and in my room, like crying. My parents didn't really know what was going on. I was still really ashamed of what was going on with me. So I decided to stop talking about it, because that didn't go very well when I did talk about it. And my family started to notice, and they were really concerned, but they didn't know how to help either. It was like anything they said just wasn't helping. A while later, I would start to feel really, really good. I felt like I was on top of the world. I think what I kind of like to compare it to is that when I was in that depression, everything was dark, everything was blackness. But then when this would happen, everything would be like bright yellow, and I would feel like I had endless energy. But then that would mean that I would stop sleeping, and I stopped eating, and I started exercising like a ton just to try to get rid of all of this energy that I had. I would later discover that it was hypomania that I was experiencing, but at the time I didn't know that. And so it was really scary. During those times, I started to engage in really like dangerous and risky behaviors. I started to do things like sneak out of the house, which is so dangerous. I remember just really liking walking around at night.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Despite the mood extremes, people with bipolar disorder often don't recognize how much their emotional instability disrupts their lives and the lives of loved ones. Let's return the conversation with Maddie.
I would fall back into that really deep depression, and I would think about what happened when I was in those elevated moods, and I would feel shamed, and I would feel regret. I would feel just awful about it. And the cycle repeated again and again and again. So it was, I would go up and I would go down every 2 weeks. And I went to see a doctor, and I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, which wasn't wrong because I was experiencing that, but I was given a medication that then triggered a full-on manic episode. So this was so much more intense than that elevated mood I was experiencing before. I hardly even remember at all, like, really what happened. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and as soon as the doctor said that, it just made so much sense, and it felt like weight had been lifted off. And I remember telling my mom, like, now I can finally get help. I can finally figure out what's wrong with me. Even though there wasn't something wrong with me, I just had mental illness that needed to be treated. Last year, I was going through a really long period of depression. It was the lowest that I have been for so long, probably since grade 9, honestly. I have had many periods of depression throughout university. There was always at least like one time per year for a few months, but this one was just lasting forever and ever. It got to a point where I just I didn't want to live anymore. And it wasn't that I didn't want to live because I love my family, my partner, my friends, but it was, I just didn't know how to go on. I just didn't know how to keep going when it's just, nothing was ending. Everything, all the darkness and the depression, it just kept going and going. I was seriously thinking about ending my life. And I didn't. I'm here, but I'm also very lucky because I had a crisis plan in place. Even though I had these feelings and I started to make these plans, I knew I needed to get help. But also my partners just started to notice. It was just got to a point where I just wouldn't get out of bed, and I just didn't have any hope. Thank goodness, my partner kind of was there and noticed, and he took me to the hospital, and I was admitted just for the night. And when you're laying there on this hospital bed, you really think about, it's not that I want to end my life. It's just I need something to change. I need some sort of hope. I need some sort of light that can get me through. And honestly, ever since then, I have just found this new peace. I felt very peaceful. My anxiety, it just kind of dropped, and I just started to really appreciate everything around me, everything that I have, my amazing support system, my kitten, my friends, and just things in my daily life that make me happy. And I can honestly say that lately I've been feeling like myself. I feel really good, and I realized that for so many years I didn't feel that way. I wasn't myself. Before we can break down the stigmas around us, we really have to look inside. We have to look at ourselves. But it also means reflecting on the biases and the stigma that we hold about other people, because they are kind of ingrained in us, in a sense. I want young people to know that when you are struggling with your mental health or you get diagnosed with a mental illness, it isn't the end. My mental illness, my struggles, my challenges, they have all made me a stronger person today. I can now say that I don't have those regrets. I am who I am today because of what I've been through. And now I can share my story to make sure that other people don't go through that. If you are struggling right now, just know that there is hope. There is always hope. Even if it's just a tiny bit, you will be able to get through what you are going through. And there is a bright future ahead of you where you will find that happiness again. You will find peace. And even if it takes a long time to get there, and it's not always going to be easy, but in the end, it really is worth it.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. According to a recent study by the University of Guelph, the mental health of farmers is worse than it was 5 years ago, and worse than that of the general population in almost every way. Let us return the conversation with a self-described recovering farmer.
I had a yearning to go back to the farm, and so I did. You know what? It was actually kind of exciting. It was a new life. I was young at the time. I was full of energy. I thought it was a good challenge, although I didn't realize at the time how challenging it would actually become. But yeah, it felt good. You know, this picture really warms my heart, because sometimes when I talk about the regrets of actually having gone farming, my wife Rose will very, very quickly remind me of how great it was to be able to raise our kids on the farm, and we were able to buy toys like that, and the kids had so much fun, and of course that made it fun for me as well. It's like I said to someone the other day, those 25 years of farming, they don't even seem real anymore. My name is Gerry Friesen. I'm also sometimes known as a recovering farmer. Sometimes I've been asked why I call myself a recovering farmer. Recovering means to return to a previous state of health, prosperity, and equanimity. Particularly with the equanimity piece, I still have some issues. Equanimity means to have an evenness of temper even when under stress, and so that's why I am still recovering. But here is my story of not just recovery, but also discovery. I grew up on a farm in western Manitoba, actually, on a poultry and grain farm. I guess growing up, I just never thought that I would farm. Sure, I did chores on the farm and I helped out where was needed, but it never seemed to be in my blood. But I guess I'm never quite sure, thinking back, what was actually in my blood. After grade 12, I moved away. I moved to the Red River Valley in Manitoba to work on a construction crew, did some building moving. But the benefit, or the bonus, I suppose, of moving is I met my life partner. We got married. After 2 years of marriage, I guess I felt unsettled. I'm not sure why, but there was a longing to go back to the farm. And so we just made the decision to move. In 1983, we did move back to the farm. In 2007, as the farm was winding down, I actually met a feed salesman in Winnipeg who I had gotten to know over the course of my hog farming years. When he asked me how I was doing, I let him know that we were winding down the farm, and I made the comment to him that I had come to the conclusion I wasn't a farmer anymore. And he kind of gave me a strange look and said, "Perhaps you never were a farmer." And it kind of struck me odd, and at first was somewhat frustrating for me to hear that, but it very quickly made sense what he was saying. And I think he had realized with my involvement in what I call agricultural politics, that perhaps I was gifted in other areas, and and he could understand why I would be pursuing those other interests at that time. Today, I am a conflict and stress management expert, working just south of Winnipeg, actually, out of our home here. And it was rather interesting. I quickly found that I seemed to have some natural ability to do conflict management work. But it was interesting because at the same time we were still farming. It was rather ironic that I was doing work for the Manitoba Farm Mediation Board when in fact our farm was already financially suffering as well. 1998, for example, hog prices dropped lower than they had been since 1930. In the matter of a year, all the hog producers basically in the province, probably across Canada, lost 15 years worth of equity. So in essence, we had been farming since 1983, so we had lost all the equity we had built to that point. But along with that came another interesting point in my life, and that is that I saw an ad in the Manitoba Cooperator asking for volunteers for the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line. As part of that, the people that had hired the organization that hired me asked me whether I would tell my own story. They were intimately aware of my own journey, and so that in 2010, I started talking about my own mental health journey. And in hindsight, I'm never quite sure if my mental illness started while I was farming, whether it started when I was younger, whether it's genetic, or whether it's situational. Whatever the case, in 2003, actually, I was meeting with a farm family that was experiencing financial difficulties. Myself and another person were dealing with them when suddenly I felt my heart do some interesting palpitations. I became short of breath and actually thought I was going to pass out. It did pass relatively quickly, but then it started happening more often.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
You can use the 3-3-3 rule for anxiety in the moment something triggers you. Just look around and identify 3 objects, then 3 sounds, then move 3 body parts. In this final segment of Open Connection, Gerry shares some of his coping mechanisms.
He very quickly diagnosed me with anxiety, which he said could lead to depression, and so he put me on antidepressants. I sometimes say that was a recovery start of my journey. Discovery came much later. I did go on antidepressants. I guess just being totally unaware of what mental illness was, what impact this would have on my life. The doctor warned me that going on antidepressants the first 6 weeks might be really tough, and in fact warned me that the depression could get worse. And so for actually 6 weeks, I found myself laying on the couch, basically in a fetal position, really not wanting to live. In fact, my wife sometimes talks about her leaving for work in the morning and being scared of what she would find when she got home. My neighbor dropped by and just out of the blue asked me, "How are you doing?" And I guess up until that point, I had fooled myself, I had fooled other people, perhaps because of the stigma, perhaps because I didn't want to talk about it. But I'd always tell people, I'm doing okay, I'm doing fine, just like we all usually do. But for some strange reason that day, I started talking about what was going on in my head. I started verbalizing. And my neighbor sat there for probably half an hour, 45 minutes, and he listened. He normalized and validated what I was feeling. He didn't sit there provide any answers or give advice, but rather just listened. And that was one of the most valuable experiences I look back on. I look back at that as a turning point in my life because it helped me start talking about what was going on. And so that's something I challenge people now to do too, is to talk about it when they start feeling overwhelmed with life. I also talked to Rose about how my journey had impacted her, and she made an interesting comment to me. She said, it fell to her that she had been married to 4 different men in her life. And so when I explored that with her, she said, we first got married, and for 2 years we had lived in married bliss, I suppose. We moved to the farm, and suddenly the farm became a priority, and so there was less of her and more of the farm. Then I got involved with my addiction issues and my mental illness, and suddenly that was a completely different person who she just as soon wouldn't have been married to. But thankfully, she didn't throw me out on my ear, but rather she supported and helped me. And then, of course, that 4th person was back to someone that she was much happier to live with, let's put it that way. When I was in my darkest times in 2004, when we were facing some significant financial issues, I was going through this depression. I was in those 6 weeks that I was laying on the couch. Absolutely, I thought of dying. Absolutely, I thought of the escape that would be. And in my twisted way of thinking, which happens when you're in the depths of depression, is that if I would die, life insurance would kick in, and at least my wife and kids wouldn't have financial worries for the rest of their lives. But no, did I ever come close? No, I didn't. Mental illness for me has become a daily journey. And I never know in the mornings when I get up what kind of day I'll have. And I know that sounds rather depressing in itself. But quite frankly, I have got to the point where I need to be very self-aware. I need to be aware of where I'm at with my emotions, with my mental health. There are certain tricks I use that are helpful for me, and different things work for different folks. I have to make sure, particularly in the wintertime, that I use what I call a happy light, but is for seasonal affective disorder. I use that every morning. I have to make sure I exercise, use my treadmill every morning. I have to make sure I eat right, I sleep properly. These are all things that each little piece is helpful. Does one help more than the other? I'm never quite sure, but cumulatively, they all do help. But again, there's no guarantees, but because of how intimately I'm now aware of my own mental health, I know there are days when I'll get up and it's going to be rough. Sometimes it's for an hour, sometimes it's for half a day, and occasionally it lasts for a day. But because of where I've been, because of what I've discovered, because of what I've learned, I know that it's not going to last forever, and that I can wait for the following day and things will be better again. So to summarize where I'm at, a challenge for other folks as well, is to make sure you're self-aware. Make sure what your mental health is all about. Make sure you understand what's going on. And in doing that, you can talk to others, talk to a friend, to a family member, and even a professional if need be, because it's okay not to be okay. And there is no shame in seeking help.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.